May 1968. Nui Tivai Hills, Phuoc Thu Province, South Vietnam. 4 Australian SAS soldiers freeze in the green twilight of triple canopy jungle. 15 meters ahead, a Viet Cong patrol moves through the undergrowth, oblivious. The Australians don't breathe, they don't move. Their fingers rest on triggers. At this distance, the enemy's sweat is visible. Their voices are clear. One wrong sound, one broken twig, and the hunted become the hunters. But the Australians don't retreat. They don't call for artillery. They don't radio for extraction. They wait, because in the doctrine of the Australian SAS, 15 meters isn't danger, it's opportunity. And in 3 seconds, 7 men will die before they understand what killed them. If you want to uncover the untold stories of the Vietnam War, the missions that changed everything, then subscribe to Vietnam War Records right now and join us as we dive deep into the shadows of history. The year is 1965. Australia commits combat forces to Vietnam, not in the hundreds, not in the thousands at first, but with precision, with intent. The 1st Squadron of the Special Air Service Regiment arrives at Nui Dat Base, a red dirt outpost carved from rubber plantations in Phuoc Thu Province. Around them, the war rages in a way the world has never seen. American forces deploy in divisions. Helicopters blacken the sky. Artillery fire shakes the earth daily. The United States military brings the doctrine of the Second World War and Korea to the jungles of Southeast Asia. Firepower, mobility, overwhelming force. Find the enemy. Fix them in place. Destroy them with steel and explosives. It is a doctrine built for open ground, for enemies who fight for wars where the front line exists. But Vietnam has no front. The jungle is the enemy's home. The Viet Cong do not mass for battle. They appear, they kill, they vanish. The North Vietnamese army moves through tunnel systems and trails invisible to aerial reconnaissance. In the green maze of the Central Highlands, in the swamps of the Mekong Delta, in the hills of Phuoc Thu, American forces struggle, not because they lack courage, not because their soldiers are untrained, but because the jungle swallows sand, because visibility ends at 30 meters, because the enemy knows every trail, every stream, every hiding place. American patrols move through the wilderness, announcing their presence with radio chatter, with the mechanical sounds of gear, with the confidence of men who believe in their firepower. And the Viet Cong listen. They wait. They choose the moment of contact. And Americans die in ambushes they never see coming. The Australian SAS arrives with a different philosophy. These men are not strangers to jungle war. A decade before Vietnam, they fought in Malaya, the Malayan emergence. 12 years of communist insurgency in rainforests as thick as Vietnam's. 12 years of learning that the jungle war is not won with artillery. It is won with patience, with silence, with the ability to become invisible. The British SAS taught them. The Malayan jungles trained them. And they won. By 1960, the communist insurgency in Malaya was crushed, not by firepower, but by small teams of men who learned to move through the jungle like shadows, who learned to track the enemy for days, who learned that in the jungle, the side that sees first, shoots first, wins. The Australians bring this knowledge to Vietnam, but they do not merely replicate British tactics. They refine them, they adapt them, and they develop something the Americans have never seen. A contact doctrine so aggressive, so intimate, so terrifyingly effective that it will shock their allies and haunt their enemies for generations. They call it close contact. But that phrase does not capture the reality. The Australians do not engage at 100 meters. They do not engage at 70 meters. They train to fight at ranges where a man can see the fear in his enemy's eyes. 20 meters, 15 meters, 10 meters. Closer than close. And at that range, there are no second chances. Major John Murphy commands the early rotations of Australian SAS in Vietnam. He is a veteran of Malaya. He knows the jungle does not reward hesitation. His philosophy is simple. The patrol that controls the moment of contact controls the outcome. If the enemy sees you first, you die. If you see the enemy first, you win. But seeing first is not enough. You must be close enough that your first shots are fatal, close enough that the enemy has no time to react. No time to return fire, no time to call for help. Murphy drills this into his men. Every patrol that leaves Nui Dat base rehearses contact drills until they are muscle memory. Contact front, contact left, contact right, contact rear. At 15 meters, at 10 meters, at 5 meters, if necessary. The first burst must kill, the second burst must kill, and then you vanish before the enemy even knows how many attacked them. The Americans watched this training with disbelief. In 1968, a cross-training program brings United States Special Forces to Nui Dat. Green Berets, Navy SEALs, men who are themselves elite, men who have fought in the jungles of Vietnam and survived. They observe Australian SAS patrol drills. They watch as four-man teams practice immediate action drills at distances that violate every principle of American infantry doctrine. An American Special Forces Major Richard Meadows writes in his report that the Australian methods seem reckless, that the close-range engagement doctrine increases risk unnecessarily. That American doctrine, built on firepower and standoff distance, is safer and more effective. He is not wrong by the standards of his training. American soldiers are taught to engage at 100 meters or more, to use the superior range and accuracy of their rifles, to call in air support and artillery, to never let the enemy close the distance. But the Australians are not fighting the American way. They are fighting the jungle way, and they know something the Americans have not yet learned. In the jungle, 100 meters does not exist. Visibility is 10 meters, 20 meters, in open patches. 30 meters if you are lucky. Beyond that, the jungle is a green one. You do not see the enemy at 100 meters. You hear them. Maybe. And if you hear them, they have already heard you. The element of surprise is gone. The ambush is set. You are the target. The Australians reject this. They train to move in absolute silence. No talking. No unnecessary gear noise. Hand signals only. Every man places his foot carefully, testing the ground before committing weight. They move at a pace that seems impossibly slow. 500 meters in an hour. 1 kilometer in 3 hours. But this slowness is survival. This silence is lethal. When an Australian SAS patrol makes contact, it is because they choose to. They have tracked the enemy. They have positioned themselves. They have waited, sometimes for hours, for the enemy to walk into the kill zone. And the kill zone is close. Terrifyingly close. 10 to 20 meters. The patrol leader initiates with a hand signal, or sometimes no signal is needed. The enemy steps into the ambush, and the jungle explodes. But it is not the explosion of American firepower. There are no grenades, no machine guns, no artillery. Just the precise, disciplined fire of 4 rifles. The L1A1 self-loading rifle, 7.62 semi-automatic, in the hands of an Australian SAS trooper, it is devastatingly accurate. The first man fires a 2-second burst, full auto. 4 or 5 rounds into the enemy point man, the second and third troopers fire simultaneously, targeting the next men in line. The fourth man, the patrol leader, assesses the situation and directs fire or orders withdrawal. The entire contact lasts 8 to 12 seconds. Then silence. The patrol melts into the jungle. No extraction, no helicopter. They walk out, moving slowly, carefully, leaving no trail. The enemy does not understand what happened. Survivors, if there are any, report ghosts. Whites who fire from impossibly close range, who vanish without sound. The Viet Cong in Phuoc Tue province begin to call the Australians Ma Rung, jungle ghosts. The D445 battalion, the local Viet Cong main force unit, issues warnings. Do not assume you are safe in thick jungle. The Australians move where you think no one can move. They watch you when you think you are alone, and when they strike, you will not see them until you are dying. This is not propaganda. This is the reality of Australian SAS operations between 1966 and 1971. Patrol after patrol, ambush after ambush, tracking operations that last for days. Contacts initiated at ranges that would horrify conventional military planners, and the results are undeniable. The kill ratio is some estimates place it at 100 to 1. 100 enemy killed for every Australian SAS soldier lost in direct combat. These are not inflated body counts. These are confirmed kills, often with captured documents and weapons, and 0 Australian casualties in most contacts, because the contacts are over before the enemy can fight back. Captain Terry O'Farrell serves with the SAS in 1967 and 68. He is one of the architects of the close contact doctrine. After the war, he will write about the philosophy behind it. He says, "We taught ourselves to get so close we could hear them breathing. The Americans thought we were mad. But in the jungle, 50 meters, at 15 meters, there is no second chance for them." O'Farrell understands what many do not. Distance in the jungle is a disadvantage. Because you cannot see, you cannot confirm. You shoot at sounds, at movement, at shadows, and you miss. Or you hit a tree, or you give away your position and the enemy maneuvers on you. But at 15 minutes, you do not shoot at shadows. You shoot at men, and you kill them. The Australian philosophy is also economic. Every patrol is 4 to 6 men. Small, light, silent. Compare this to American long-range patrols, which often number 8 to 12. But more noise, more movement, easier to detect. The Australians believe that in reconnaissance, the mission is not to destroy the enemy. The mission is to find the enemy, report their location, and if the opportunity presents itself, kill them quietly and disappear. No grand battles, no calling in airstrikes that announce your presence to every enemy unit within 10 kilometers, just silent, lethal contact. And then gone. This doctrine shocks the Americans because it inverts their understanding of force protection. American doctrine says, maximize your firepower, maximize your support, minimize your risk. Australian doctrine says, maximize your stealth, maximize your surprise, and the risk takes care of itself. Because if the enemy does not know you are there, they cannot hurt you. And if you strike first at close range, they cannot fight back. It is a doctrine that requires extraordinary discipline, extraordinary training, extraordinary nerve. One man panics, one man fires too early, one man makes noise at the wrong moment, and the entire patrol is compromised. But the Australians train for this. They train until every man can move through the jungle in darkness without sound, until every man can remain motionless for hours, ignoring insects, ignoring heat, ignoring thirst, until every man can fire his weapon with precision under the stress of imminent death. In August 1969, Operation Stirling unfolds in the Nui Tivai Hills. A 5-man patrol from 3 Squadron SAS, designated Patrol 31, is tasked with reconnaissance of a suspected Viet Cong resupply route. The patrol leader is Corporal Jimmy D., a veteran of multiple tours. His men are experienced. They know the drill. They insert by helicopter 10 kilometers from the target area and walk in over 2 days, moving slowly, stopping frequently to listen, to observe, to ensure they are not followed. The jungle here is thick, triple canopy. The ground is soft, damp, covered in rotting leaves. Every step must be tested. A snapped twig can be heard 50 meters away in the stillness. On the 3rd day, the patrol finds the trail. Fresh footprints, many men, recently passed. Corporal Jimmy D. makes the decision. They will set an ambush. The patrol moves 30 meters off the trail and settles into position. They do not dig in. They do not cut vegetation. They simply lie down in the natural cover, weapons pointed at the trail, and they wait. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Insects crawl over them. Sweat soaks their uniforms. They do not move. At 1400 hours, they hear voices. Vietnamese. Casual conversation. The enemy is not alert. They do not expect contact. They are walking in column, weapons slung, talking about food, about home, about the war. The Viet Cong patrol consists of 9 men. They are resupplying a forward camp. They carry packs loaded with rice, ammunition, medical supplies. The first enemy soldier passes within 12 meters of the Australians. He does not see them. The second man. The third. Corporal Jimmy D. waits. He is counting, waiting for the center of the column to enter the kill zone. When the 5th man is directly in front of him, he fires. The L1A1 barks. 3 rounds. The man drops instantly. Simultaneously, the other Australians open fire. The jungle fills with the sharp crack of rifle fire, not the sustained roar of a machine gun. Just precise aimed shot. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. 4 seconds. 7 Viet Cong soldiers fall. The remaining 2 turn and run. The Australians do not pursue. Corporal Jimmy D. signals withdrawal. The patrol rises and moves deeper into the jungle, away from the trail, moving fast now, putting distance between themselves and the contact site. Within 5 minutes, they are 500 meters away. They stop. They listen. No pursuit. No return fire. No helicopters. The enemy has no idea how many attacked them, or from where, or where they went. The patrol continues moving west, looping away from the direct route back to base. They walk for 6 hours, covering 15 kilometers through the jungle. No extraction, no radio call for help. They walk out on their feet, arriving at a prearranged pickup zone at dawn the next day. The entire operation from insertion to extraction is conducted in near silence. The enemy never knows who hit them. Australian SAS, American Special Forces, South Vietnamese Rangers. They find 7 bodies and 2 blood trails. They recover some of the supplies, and they add another report to their... The Australians are operating in the area, and they are ghosts. This is not an exceptional operation. This is routine for the Australian SAS in Vietnam. Operation Marsden in February 1970 follows a similar pattern. A 4-man patrol ambushes a Viet Cong tax collector convoy. Tax collectors in Viet Cong-controlled areas are essential to the insurgency. They move through villages, collecting money, rice, supplies from the population. They are usually protected by armed escorts. Intelligence reports indicate a convoy will move through a specific area in the Hat Dyke forest. The SAS patrol inserts and moves to the suspected route. They find a trail and set an ambush. The ambush position is 18 meters from the trail, close enough to ensure every shot is fatal, far enough to provide a moment of reaction time if the enemy somehow detects them first. The convoy arrives at mid-morning. 11 men, 3 are clearly civilians, carrying documents and cash. 8 are armed Viet Cong soldiers. The patrol leader waits until the entire group is in the kill zone. Then he detonates a claymore mine. The claymore is an American invention, but the Australians use it with brutal efficiency. 700 steel balls explode outward in a 60-degree arc. At 18 meters, the effect is catastrophic. The lead soldiers are shredded, the civilians drop. The rear guards turn to run, and the Australians open fire. Precise shots. No panic, no spray and pray. Just aimed fire at men who are exposed, confused, dying. 11 seconds. 11 bodies. The patrol moves forward quickly, grabs the documents. No photographs, no trophies, just the documents, which contain names, locations, financial records. The patrol walks out, 15 kilometers through the jungle. No contact, no pursuit. They arrive at base 26 hours after the ambush. Mission complete. These operations are reported to the American command. MACV, Military Assistance Command Vietnam, receives briefings on Australian methods. Some American officers are impressed, others are skeptical. The doctrine seems too aggressive, too risky. What if the enemy is larger than expected? What if the ambush fails? What if the patrol is surrounded? The Australians have answers to these. If the enemy is larger than expected, you do not initiate contact. You observe and report. If the ambush fails, if somehow the enemy detects you first, you have rehearsed immediate action drills. Break contact, throw smoke, move fast, use the jungle. And if you are surrounded, you fight your way out. But the key is, you are rarely surrounded, because the enemy does not know you are there until you fire. And by the time they understand what is happening, you are gone. In 1968 and 69, the American military begins to take the Australian method seriously. A formal cross-training program is established. Navy SEALs from Team 1 deploy to Nui Dat for 2 weeks of joint operations. They patrol with Australian SAS teams. They learn the movement techniques, the hand signals, the ambush drills, the close contact doctrine. The SEAL team members are experienced combat veterans. They have conducted operations in the Mekong Delta. They are not easily impressed, but the Australian methods impress them. One SEAL writes in his after-action report, "The Australian SAS operates with a level of discipline and patience we rarely see. Their willingness to engage at close range increases risk, but also increases lethality. The enemy does not expect Western forces to initiate contact at us. This gives the Australians a psychological and tactical advantage." Richard Meadows, the American Special Forces major who initially questioned the Australian doctrine, changes his mind after observing a joint operation. In 1969, he accompanies an Australian patrol into the jungle. For 3 days, Meadows watches as the Australians move in near silence, stopping frequently, observing, listening. On the 3rd day, they locate the enemy camp. 12 Viet Cong soldiers, resting in a temporary base. The Australians do not call for an airstrike. They do not request artillery. They move into position 25 meters from the camp and wait for nightfall. At 0300 hours, the camp is asleep. 2 sentries are awake, but they are not alert. They are smoking, talking quietly. The Australians move closer. 15 meters, 10 meters. Meadows will later say he could not believe how close they got. He could hear the sentries' conversation. He could see the glow of their cigarettes. The patrol leader gives the signal. 4 rifles fire simultaneously, the sentries drop. The sleeping Viet Cong soldiers wake to chaos. Some reach for weapons. Some try to run. The Australians fire in short, controlled bursts. 6 seconds, 8 seconds, 10 seconds. Then silence. The patrol leader signals withdrawal. They move back into the jungle and walk through the night, putting distance between themselves and the contact site. By dawn, they are 5 kilometers away. The enemy will find no Australian casualties, no shell casings, because the Australians police their brass even in the middle of a firefight. No evidence except the dead. Meadows returns to his unit and revises his assessment. The Australian close contact doctrine is not reckless, it is calculated, and it is devastatingly effective. This assessment begins to influence American Special Forces training. Not universally. The American military is too large, too bureaucratic to change doctrine quickly, but in certain units, the lessons are absorbed. Viet Cong, the highly classified Special Operations Group running cross-border operations into Laos and Cambodia, begins experimenting with closer engagement ranges. Phoenix program operatives, conducting targeted raids against Viet Cong infrastructure, adopt Australian ambush techniques. Navy SEAL teams in the Mekong Delta reduce their engagement distances, learning that in the dense mangrove swamps, 50 meters is as invisible as 500. And years later, when the United States Army forms Delta Force in 1977, Richard Meadows is one of the founding members. He brings with him the lessons of the Australian SAS, the importance of stealth, the value of patience, and the lethality of close contact. But why does the close contact doctrine work? Why do the Australians succeed where others struggle? The answer is training. The answer is mindset. The answer is experience. Australian SAS selection is brutal. Only 5 to 10% of applicants pass. The training focuses not on physical strength, though that is required. It focuses on mental toughness, on the ability to endure discomfort, on the ability to remain calm under stress, on the ability to make decisions when exhausted, when scared, when every instinct says to run. The men who pass this selection are not supermen. They are ordinary soldiers who have been pushed to their limits and have proven they will not break. Once selected, the training continues. Jungle warfare courses, navigation, tracking, counter-tracking, how to move silently, how to read the jungle, how to understand wind direction, animal behavior, the sounds that indicate human presence, how to set an ambush, how to withdraw from an ambush, how to survive if separated from your patrol, how to evade pursuit, how to escape and evade if captured, and above all, marksmanship. Australian SAS troopers fire thousands of rounds in training. They practice until they can hit a man-sized target at 100 meters in under 2 seconds, until they can fire accurately from prone, kneeling, standing, until they can fire accurately after running, after crawling, after lying motionless for hours, until the rifle is an extension of their body. This training is combined with experience. Many of the Australian SAS soldiers in Vietnam are veterans of Malaya. They have already fought a jungle war. They have already learned the lesson. They teach the younger soldiers. They pass on the knowledge. Do not move fast. Do not make noise. Do not trust the obvious trail. Do not assume the jungle is empty. Always assume the enemy is watching. Always assume you are being hunted. And when you make contact, make it count. Because in the jungle, there are no second chances. The Viet Cong learned to fear the Australians, not because the Australians are more brutal, not because they take no prisoners, though in the deep jungle, prisoners are rare on all sides, but because the Australians are unpredictable. The Viet Cong learned to anticipate American operations. Helicopters mean an assault is coming. Artillery means the Americans have found. Airstrikes mean a large operation. The VC can hear these things. They can prepare, they can move, they can set counter-ambushes. But the Australians give no warning. There are no helicopters until after the contact. No artillery, no airstrikes, just sudden, close, lethal violence, and then nothing. The Australians are gone. Nguyen Van Hue is a Viet Cong company commander in the D445 battalion. In 1985, he is interviewed by a historian researching the war. He speaks carefully, choosing his words. He says the Americans were loud, predictable. We could hear helicopters, then artillery, then soldiers. We knew they were coming. We could prepare. The Australians were silent. We did not know they were near until bullets came. Very close. Too close. Many comrades died not seeing the enemy. We feared the Australians more than the Americans, not because they killed more, but because we never knew when they would come. This fear is strategic. The Australian SAS does not destroy the Viet Cong in Phuoc Tue province. The VC are too numerous, too resilient, but the SAS makes the jungle unsafe for them. VC units cannot rest. They cannot move freely. They cannot assume that any trail, any camp, any meeting point is secure, because the Australians might be watching. And if the Australians are watching, death will come without warning. This psychological pressure is as valuable as any body count. It forces the VC to move more slowly, more cautiously. It reduces their effectiveness. North Vietnamese Army intelligence documents captured in 1970 include assessments of Australian tactics. One report describes the Australian reconnaissance method as the patient hunter approach. It warns NVA units not to assume safety in thick jungle. It states that Australian patrols have been observed operating within hand grenade range of NVA positions without being detected. The report recommends increased use of counter-tracking techniques, increased vigilance, and avoidance of predictable routes. These are defensive measures. The NEA, one of the most experienced and effective light infantry forces in history, is taking defensive measures because of Australian SAS patrols, 4-man patrols. This is the power of the close contact doctrine. Post-war, Vietnamese veterans are interviewed. Many speak with respect about their enemies. American soldiers were brave, they say. They fought hard. But the Australians were different. Levan Tan, an NVA veteran, says in a 2005 interview, Americans fought with machines, with helicopters and bombs. The Australians fought like us. Quietly, patiently, close. We understood American tactics. We did not always understand Australian tactics. They were more dangerous because they were more like us. This is perhaps the highest compliment an enemy can give. You fight like us. You are dangerous because you understand the jungle as we do. The Australian close contact doctrine is not without cost. Patrols are sometimes compromised. Contacts sometimes go wrong. Men are wounded. Men die. But the ratio of success to failure is extraordinary. And the lessons learned in Vietnam echo forward through military history. Modern special forces around the world study Australian SAS tactics, the emphasis on stealth, the patience, the willingness to get close before initiating contact. These principles are now standard in counter-insurgency and special reconnaissance doctrine. The close-quarters battle techniques used by hostage rescue teams, by counter-terrorism units, by modern special forces in Iraq and Afghanistan all trace their lineage back in part to the jungles of Vietnam and the men who learned to fight at closer than close range. But in the moment, in 1968, in 1969, in 1970, the Australians are simply doing their job. They do not think of themselves as revolutionizing warfare. They think of themselves as soldiers trying to survive and complete the mission. The close contact doctrine is not academic theory, it is practical necessity. It is the result of hard experience, of lessons learned in blood, of understanding that in the jungle the old rules do not apply. Major John Murphy, Captain Terry O'Farrell, Corporal Jimmy D, and hundreds of other Australian SAS soldiers walk into the green hell of the Vietnamese jungle and emerge with a doctrine that shocks their allies, terrifies their enemies, and changes the way the world thinks about small unit tactics. The respect between Australian and American special forces grows throughout the war. Initial skepticism gives way to admiration. By 1970, American Special Forces officers routinely request joint operations with Australian SAS. They want their men to see the Australian methods in action. They want to learn. And the Australians, for their part, respect the Americans. They recognize that the American approach, built on firepower and mobility, is effective in its own context. In large-scale operations, in conventional battles, American doctrine dominates. But in the jungle, in the shadows, in the silent war of reconnaissance and ambush, the Australian way is superior, and the Americans are humble enough to admit it. This humility, this willingness to learn, is one of the untold stories of the Vietnam War. The narrative often focuses on failure, on the collapse of South Vietnam, on the political disaster, on the social upheaval in America. But within the war there are stories of adaptation, of learning, of soldiers from different nations working together, sharing knowledge, improving their craft. The Australian SAS and American Special Forces relationship is one of these stories. Two allies, two different philosophies, learning from each other, and in the process, creating tactics and techniques that will save lives in future wars. The legacy of the closer-than-close contact doctrine extends beyond tactics. It is a legacy of mindset, of understanding that technology and firepower, while important, that sometimes the old skills matter. Tracking, fieldcraft, patience, discipline, the ability to endure discomfort and fear, the willingness to close with the enemy, to take the risk, to strike hard and vanish. These are not the skills of machines. These are human skills. Skills that require years to develop. Skills that cannot be rushed. Skills that separate elite soldiers from ordinary soldiers. In the modern era, as militaries around the world invest in drones, in precision weapons, in technology, there is sometimes a temptation to believe that the human element is less important, that wars can be fought from a distance, that soldiers do not need to endure the jungle, the mud, the fear. The Australian SAS in Vietnam proves otherwise. Technology did not win the jungle war. Helicopters, artillery, airstrikes, all were available, but they did not make the jungle safe. Small teams of highly trained men, moving in silence, striking at close range, those teams made the difference. Not because they killed more, but because they controlled the ground. Because the enemy feared them. Because they made the jungle, the enemy's greatest advantage, into a killing ground. This lesson is uncomfortable for modern military planners. It suggests that some things cannot be automated, that some skills cannot be replaced, that there will always be a need for soldiers who can move through hostile terrain, who can operate independently, who can make life and death decisions in seconds without waiting for orders from headquarters. The Australian SAS embodied these qualities in Vietnam, and in doing so they set a standard that special forces units around the world still strive to meet. The Vietnam War ended for Australia in 1971. The last Australian combat troops withdrew. The war continued for another 4 years without them. And when Saigon fell in 1975, the Australian contribution was largely forgotten in the chaos. But the soldiers remembered, the Vietnamese remembered, and the lessons remained. In the decades since, historians and military analysts have revisited the Australian role in Vietnam. They have studied the tactics, they have interviewed the veterans, both Australian and Vietnamese, and they have concluded that the Australian SAS was one of the most effective units in the entire war. Not the largest, not the most famous, but pound for pound, man for man, one of the most lethal. The kill ratio is part of the story. The estimated 100-to-1 ratio is extraordinary by any measure, but statistics do not capture the full picture. They do not capture the fear, the psychological impact, the disruption of enemy operations, the intelligence gathered, the prisoners taken, the documents captured, the enemy plans disrupted. The Australian SAS did not win the Vietnam. No single unit could. The war was lost ultimately, not on the battlefield but in the political realm. But within their area of operations, in Phuoc Thu Province, the Australian SAS achieved dominance. The Viet Cong could not move freely. They could not rest. They could not win. And this dominance was built on the close contact doctrine, on the willingness to get closer than anyone thought possible, to initiate combat at ranges where both sides could see the whites of each other's eyes, to trust in training, in discipline, in the skills of the individual soldier, to reject the easy answer of firepower and technology, and instead embrace the... This is the story of how the Australian SAS shocked the United States Special Forces, not with new weapons, not with advanced technology, but with a return to fundamentals, with tactics that would have been recognizable to soldiers 100 years earlier. Stealth, patience, surprise, lethality, and the courage to close with the enemy and destroy him. The respect this earned is enduring. American Special Forces veterans who served with the Australians speak of them with reverence. The Australians taught us that sometimes the hard way is the right way, one veteran says. They taught us that you don't always need a radio and an airstrike. Sometimes you just need the courage to get close. This respect is mutual. Australian veterans speak highly of their American counterparts. The Americans had resources we could only dream of, one says, but they were willing to learn. They didn't let pride get in the way. That's rare. That's professional. And the Vietnamese, the enemy, also remember. In interviews conducted decades after the war, former Viet Cong and NVA soldiers are asked about their most feared opponents. Many named the Australians, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with the respect one warrior gives another. They were good soldiers, the Vietnamese say. They understood the jungle. They understood us. They were worthy enemies. In the brutal calculus of war, there is no higher compliment The story of the Australian SAS close contact doctrine is not a story of glory. War is not glorious. It is a story of professionalism, of men doing a difficult job in the most difficult circumstances, of soldiers who trained harder, who thought deeper, who took greater risks, and who achieved extraordinary results. It is a story that deserves to be told, not to glorify war, but to honor skill, to recognize courage, to understand that even in the chaos and horror of combat, there is room for excellence, for innovation, for the refinement of the warrior's craft. As the last light fades over the jungles of Phuoc Tu province, as the veterans grow old and the memories fade, the lessons remain, carved into training manuals, taught in special forces schools, passed from one generation of soldiers to the next. The Australians got close, closer than anyone thought possible, closer than the enemy expected. And at that range, in that green hell, they were unstoppable. This is their legacy. This is their story. And it is a story that will be studied as long as soldiers. If you want to continue uncovering these hidden chapters of the Vietnam War, the tactics that changed history, the soldiers who defied the odds, then subscribe to Vietnam War Records now, hit that notification bell, and join us on this journey through the shadows of the past. Because these stories matter, these lessons matter, and we will never let them be forgotten.